I became the other woman in a married man's life, and his mother was my biggest supporter. I know how that sounds, trust me. But before you judge me, wait until you hear how this all started. Because the sweet mother-in-law everyone saw wasn't who she really was. And me? I was exactly what she needed to destroy her own son's marriage. My name is Vanessa Torres. I met my lover Tyler at a charity gala in Manhattan, spring of 2023. I was 26, working client services at a financial consulting firm, and I was only there because my boss had scored last-minute tickets. The event was way too fancy for me. Expensive dresses, conversations about investments I barely understood. I was trying not to look completely out of place when Linda approached me. She told me I looked lost, smiled in a way that made me relax instantly. When I admitted it was obvious, she laughed and said half the people there were faking it too. Linda was 57, elegant in a way I'd never be, and she made me feel like I belonged. She introduced me to Tyler before I even realized what was happening. He was across the ballroom, impeccable gray suit, talking with executives. When Linda waved him over, he came with that smile I'd spend the next month seeing in secret. She mentioned casually that Rachel didn't really enjoy these events. That's how it started. Linda practically threw us at each other, and I thought it was just kindness. Tyler was charming, attentive, made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. We talked for 20 minutes, and when he asked for my number, I gave it without thinking twice. Linda watched it all with that satisfied smile. What I didn't know was that Linda had planned everything. She'd seen my LinkedIn profile, had asked my boss about me, had even suggested she bring me to the event. Years later, when everything exploded, Linda confessed this to me, saying I'd been handpicked. 2 weeks later, Linda invited me to lunch. Just the two of us, this upscale place in Midtown. She talked about Tyler's marriage with casual disdain that shocked me, told me Rachel was too bland, too boring, had no ambition. She's not good enough for my son. Rachel is so basic, no drive, no class. She doesn't understand what matters in Tyler's world. I should have seen the red flags. But Linda was so convincing that I started believing maybe she was right. She told me stories about their marriage, how Rachel was dull at events, how she held Tyler back. Someone like me, she implied without saying it. Tyler started texting me every day after that. Dinners, coffee, walks through Central Park. And Linda? She covered for us. When Rachel asked where he was, Linda lied. When we needed a place to meet, Linda offered her Upper East Side apartment. That first night at Linda's apartment, when Tyler had gone to the bathroom, she leaned close with this conspiratorial smile. Give him 6 months, and Tyler will realize what he's been missing. Have you ever felt used by someone who didn't care how the whole world would judge you? I thought I'd found not just the love of my life, but a family that accepted me. I was so wrong. Leave a comment telling me what you'd do, and go ahead and subscribe. Because this story of how Linda used me to destroy her own son's marriage is just getting started. I didn't realize I was being manipulated. I didn't see that Linda didn't want me for Tyler. She wanted me as a weapon. And when everything crumbled, when Rachel found out, Linda was the first to abandon me. But that comes later. For now, I was in love, supported by Linda, and completely blind to the fact that women like her don't help another woman out of kindness. The affair with Tyler became my entire world within 3 months. We'd meet at Linda's apartment twice a week, sometimes more when Rachel had late meetings. Linda would call me beforehand, give me the all clear, even leave wine and cheese out for us. Linda and I started meeting regularly, just the two of us. She treated me like the daughter-in-law she wished she had. She'd tell me how Tyler lit up when he talked about me, how Rachel had never made him this happy. I asked her once why she was helping us. Linda looked at me with those calculating eyes I didn't recognize yet. Because family isn't always blood, sweetheart. Sometimes it's about finding the right fit. Tyler and I fell into this routine that felt both thrilling and suffocating. He'd text me good morning before Rachel woke up, send pictures of his meetings, call me on his drive home. I became the other woman who knew more about his day than his own wife did. But here's what I didn't understand. While Linda was playing supportive mother-in-law, she was also documenting everything. Every time I came to her apartment, there were cameras I didn't know about. Every confession I made over lunch, she was filing away. Rachel started getting suspicious around month 4. Tyler would tell me how she questioned him more, checked his phone, asked Linda pointed questions. And each time, Linda would lie for him, tell Rachel she was being paranoid, controlling. I remember one night at Linda's place, Rachel called Tyler 5 times. He ignored everyone, and when he finally texted back saying he was at a work dinner, Linda coached him on what to say. I watched her orchestrate that lie in real time, and I felt powerful. But Rachel wasn't stupid. She'd hired someone to follow Tyler. And when that investigator started piecing things together, Linda's address came up again and again. The affair was changing me. I started dressing differently, acting more confident. Linda encouraged it, bought me clothes, took me to her stylist, taught me how to fit into Tyler's world better. 6 months in, Tyler started talking about leaving Rachel. Not directly, but in those careful ways men do when they're testing if you'll wait. Linda's prophecy was coming true, and I believed it was because of me. Month 7 was when I first started noticing something was off about Linda. Little things, inconsistencies that didn't make sense if she really cared about me. Like the time Rachel showed up at Linda's building unannounced. Tyler and I were inside, and Linda texted me to stay quiet. But instead of defending us, I heard her through the door telling Rachel that she thought Tyler had been acting strange too. She threw him under the bus so smoothly. She's so easy to manipulate. Women like Rachel believe everything you tell them. That comment stuck with me. If Linda could manipulate Rachel so easily, what was stopping her from manipulating me? But Tyler was still devoted, and Linda was still supportive in front of me. I pushed those doubts down. Around this time, Linda started asking more personal questions. About my family, my finances, where I saw myself in 5 years. She wanted to know if I'd sign a prenup if Tyler left Rachel. If I understood the complications of their family's wealth. She told me she was just protecting Tyler, that Rachel had gone after him for money initially. The implication was clear. She was vetting me. I should have been offended, but instead I felt like I was passing some test. Tyler started pulling back slightly. Not dramatically, but enough that I noticed. He'd cancel plans last minute, take longer to respond, seem distracted when we were together. When I asked about it, he blamed stress, tension with Rachel, Linda's health concerns he didn't elaborate on. He told me once that Linda had been acting weird, that he thought she was regretting helping us. But when I asked Linda directly, she denied it. Said Tyler was just nervous about Rachel finding out, that men get cold feet before they leave. There was this dinner Linda hosted, supposedly to celebrate my promotion. But halfway through, she casually mentioned that Rachel had been asking about me. That she'd seen my name in emails on Tyler's computer. When I asked if Rachel believed the colleague's story, Linda smiled in that cold way and said Rachel wanted to believe it. But I started wondering, if Rachel was this close to figuring it out, why wasn't Linda more worried? Tyler started asking questions that felt like tests. Did I love him enough to wait if he needed more time? Could I handle public scrutiny if their divorce got messy? He told me Linda thought Rachel might try to destroy me publicly. The affair hit 8 months, and Linda threw an intimate dinner at her place. Just the 3 of us, champagne, expensive food. She toasted to new beginnings, and Tyler squeezed my hand under the table like we'd already won. But Linda's eyes had something in them I couldn't name. Something calculating. For the first time, I felt like prey. Month 9 was when Linda's mask started slipping, just enough for me to see glimpses of who she really was. She invited me to lunch, just the 2 of us. I thought it was another bonding session. Instead, she handed me a folder. When I asked what it was, she said one word: insurance. Inside were legal papers about postnuptial agreements, divorce proceedings, financial protections. Linda had been preparing for the fallout before I even knew there would be one. When this comes out, and it will, Rachel is going to come after everyone involved. I need you ready for that. I reminded her she'd said Rachel was weak. Linda's smile was sharp when she corrected me, told me she'd said Rachel was easy to manipulate, not that she wouldn't fight when cornered. That planted the first real seeds of doubt. Linda wasn't just supporting our affair, she was war planning for its exposure. Like she wanted it to explode publicly. Tyler was unaware of Linda's preparation. When I mentioned the folder, he seemed surprised, uncomfortable. He said Linda was just overprotective, that she planned for worst-case scenarios. Linda started making subtle comments that chipped away at my confidence. She'd tell me Rachel was going to paint me as the villain, that the other woman always gets destroyed. She'd say she hoped I was prepared for people to call me a homewrecker. She was pre-programming me for public humiliation. Linda also started controlling more of our logistics. She'd tell us when we could meet, for how long. She insisted we only communicate through apps she recommended, said Rachel was tech-savvy. But Tyler told me Rachel had actually been calmer lately, less suspicious. That contradiction bothered me. One night, Linda called me at midnight. Her voice sounded different, harder. She told me flatly that Rachel knew, that she'd confronted Tyler. When I asked what he'd told her, Linda said he'd denied everything, but Rachel wasn't buying it, that she was hiring a lawyer. I started panicking. But Linda's response chilled me. You do nothing. You wait for my instructions. This needs to play out exactly right, or all three of us lose. That phrase, all three of us, finally made me realize I wasn't Linda's chosen daughter-in-law. I was a chess piece in whatever game she was playing. The next morning, Linda called again. This time her voice was warm, like that midnight call had been a different person. She told me she'd talked to Tyler, that they had a plan, that Rachel wanted to meet with all of us together. When I asked why we'd let that happen, Linda said Rachel thought she was going to win, and that women like her needed to learn they don't always get what they want. I agreed, because I was in too deep to refuse. But I realized Linda had been orchestrating this confrontation from the beginning. She wasn't trying to prevent Rachel from finding out. She was engineering exactly how and when it would happen. The meeting happened at Linda's apartment. I showed up 30 minutes early because I couldn't function knowing I was about to face Rachel. Linda answered the door in an elegant black dress, pearls, full makeup. Like she was attending a gala, not a family implosion. Tyler arrived 10 minutes later, looking like he might throw up. Rachel came last, exactly on time. When I saw her face to face, I understood why Linda had called her bland. She wasn't. She was beautiful in this understated way that made me feel cheap. Linda orchestrated the whole thing. She sat us down, poured wine no one drank, and started speaking before Rachel could say a word. She positioned herself between me and Tyler, separating us like we weren't even together. Rachel's voice was steady, stronger than I expected. She told us she didn't have concerns, she had proof. Photos, credit card statements, text messages. She knew about the affair, knew it happened in this apartment, and knew Linda had been helping us. She looked directly at Linda, and I saw something flash across Linda's face. Not shame, satisfaction. Linda told her she'd helped us because Tyler was miserable, that Rachel had made him that way. The performance was stunning. I wanted to defend Rachel, but Tyler just sat there silent, and I realized how powerless we were. Rachel pulled out a folder. She'd filed for divorce, was taking half of everything, and was suing Linda for alienation of affection since she'd facilitated the affair on her property. The room went cold. From Linda's face, she'd been expecting it. Go ahead. Drag this through court. Let everyone see how you drove Tyler into another woman's arms with your mediocrity. Rachel stood, tears in her eyes, but her voice never wavered. She told us she wasn't the villain, that neither was I, honestly, that Linda was. That Linda had sabotaged her own son's marriage because she couldn't control it, that she'd used both of us to create chaos. She left without another word. Tyler finally spoke, his voice cracking, asking Linda what she'd done. Linda looked at him with contempt and told him she'd saved him from boring suburban mediocrity. He looked at me, and I saw the realization that Linda had played both of us. He asked if I'd known she'd planned all this. I started crying, ugly crying that made me feel exactly like what I was. Hit that like because this gets way crazier, trust me. Rachel's lawsuit was just the beginning. Leave a comment telling me if you think I should have seen this coming, because looking back, all the signs were there. Linda collected the wine glasses like nothing happened and told us we were both so dramatic. That this was just the beginning, that Rachel thought she'd won but had no idea what was coming. Tyler left without looking at me. And I sat there realizing I'd been used by the woman I'd trusted most. The week after that confrontation, everything I thought I knew started crumbling. Tyler stopped answering my calls. Linda's apartment became off limits. She said we needed distance while Rachel's lawyer built her case. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Rachel's words kept echoing about Linda sabotaging her own son's marriage. I'd dismissed it as anger, but now those words made horrible sense. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Rachel's attorney asking if I'd give a deposition about Linda's involvement. I refused at first. The lawyer said Linda had already given her own deposition, and I might want to hear what she'd said. They sent me a transcript. Reading Linda's words was like ice water. She'd told the court I'd pursued Tyler aggressively, that she'd tried to discourage the affair, that I'd manipulated my way into their family. She'd painted herself as the concerned mother protecting her son from a gold digger. Every lunch, every conversation where she'd encouraged me, Linda had reframed as me pressuring her, threatening to expose secrets if she didn't help. She had documentation. Texts she'd saved, emails, receipts from lunches she'd paid. I called her, hands shaking. Linda's voice was cold, nothing like the warm woman I'd known. She told me she'd done what she needed to protect her family, that I was collateral damage. You think anyone's going to believe the other woman over a mother defending her son? I have money for lawyers, reputation. What do you have, Vanessa? She hung up. I sat there understanding I'd never been Linda's ally. I'd been her tool. Rachel's lawyer called again. This time I agreed to give a deposition. The attorney told me they'd been investigating Linda. This wasn't the first time she'd sabotaged one of Tyler's relationships. Linda had done this before, 15 years ago, with his first serious girlfriend. Different tactics, same pattern. Rachel had found her, and now there was a pattern that made Linda look less like a protective parent and more like something darker. I spent hours with Rachel's team, telling them everything. How Linda had handpicked me, orchestrated our meeting, offered her apartment, coached Tyler on lying. I showed them texts, voicemails, proof that her deposition was lies. Tyler finally contacted me 3 weeks later. He asked to meet. When I saw him, he looked destroyed. He told me Linda had convinced him I'd known about her plan all along. I asked why he'd believe that. He didn't have an answer. Just kept saying Linda had been so convincing, that she'd shown him evidence she'd manufactured. The transition was happening. I was starting to see myself not as the other woman, who'd made bad choices, but as someone manipulated just as much as Rachel. Month 10 since I'd met Linda, and I was finally understanding the real game. Rachel's lawyer had done a deep dive into the family's finances, and what they'd uncovered explained everything. Linda wasn't just wealthy from Tyler's father's life insurance. She was heavily in debt, hundreds of thousands from a failed business she'd hidden from Tyler. She'd been borrowing against his trust fund, his inheritance, running out of ways to cover it up. Rachel had started asking questions about family, finances, wanted documentation for estate planning, and Linda had panicked. The affair wasn't about me being better for Tyler. It was about creating enough chaos that Rachel would divorce him before she discovered what Linda had been stealing. If Rachel found out about the missing money while married, she could sue Linda for mismanagement of marital assets. But if they divorced first, if Rachel was too focused on betrayal to dig into finances, Linda could hide the theft. I'd been a distraction, a bomb Linda had planted and detonated at exactly the right time. Every lunch she'd paid for, every gift, all from Tyler's trust fund while ensuring I'd be the one everyone blamed. When his wife's lawyer showed me the financial documents, I felt sick. Linda had spent over $300,000 of Tyler's inheritance maintaining her lifestyle. The wine at her place? His money. The stylist? His money. Rachel hadn't known until her forensic accountant started digging. She'd been looking for hidden assets and found massive discrepancies in Linda's guardianship. I met with Rachel voluntarily during this period. Not in a courtroom, but at her request in a park. It was awkward, painful. She wasn't angry anymore, just tired and sad. She told me she'd been married to Tyler for 6 years, that they'd been happy until Linda started interfering more aggressively after his father died. Linda had always been controlling, but after becoming trustee, she'd gotten worse. I think Linda saw me as a threat to her control. And you were her solution. Not a person, just a problem solver she could use and throw away. I asked why she was being civil with me. She told me we'd both been Linda's victims, that Linda had probably laughed watching us tear each other apart while she stole from her own son. I started cooperating fully with Rachel's case. Gave them everything, every text from Linda, every voicemail, every memory. The case wasn't just about alienation of affection. It was about financial elder abuse, fraud, embezzlement. Tyler reached out again, apologized for believing Linda's lies. He'd confronted Linda about the missing money, and she'd denied everything until her lawyers told her to stop talking. We didn't get back together. Too much damage. But we reached this strange understanding, him, me, and Rachel, that we'd all been used. The court date was set for 3 months out. Rachel's lawyers were confident they had enough evidence to not only win, but press criminal charges against Linda. 2 weeks before the trial, Linda's lawyer reached out saying she wanted to speak with me directly. Every attorney told me it was a trap. But I needed to look her in the eye one more time. We met at a cafe in Midtown, far from any place we'd shared. Linda looked different, older, like the mask had finally cracked. She didn't waste time. She got straight to why she'd asked to meet. She told me the embezzlement charges were going to stick, that her lawyers advised her to take a plea deal. She was looking at jail time, would lose her role as trustee, would be sued by Tyler for every penny. Her reputation was destroyed, her friends gone, and she wanted me to know why. Linda started talking, and what came out wasn't remorse. It was something darker. She told me she'd been planning to sabotage Tyler's marriage long before I existed. Rachel had been getting too close to the financial discrepancies, asking questions. She'd needed a distraction big enough, scandalous enough, that Rachel would be too devastated to think about money. She'd needed someone young, ambitious, desperate for approval. She'd screened dozens of women before she found me. You were the right combination of naive and hungry, smart enough to hold Tyler's interest, but not experienced enough to see what I was doing. I knew you'd fall for him, and I knew you'd trust me because I gave you what you'd always wanted. Acceptance. I asked if she'd ever felt guilty. Her answer was chilling. She told me guilt was for people who had other options, that she'd done what was necessary to protect her lifestyle. The affair had worked exactly as planned, until Rachel turned out to be smarter than anticipated. Instead of crumbling, Rachel hired investigators and forensic accountants. What struck me was how Linda talked about us like characters in a story, not real people. Tyler was an asset to manage, Rachel was an obstacle to remove, and I was a tool to use and discard. I asked why she was telling me this. She smiled, that cold smile, and said she wanted me to know I hadn't been special. That every warm word, every gesture had been calculated. She needed me to understand I'd never mattered. You'll testify against me anyway, but I want you to know you made it easy. You were so desperate to be loved that you never questioned why I'd support something as trashy as an affair. She left cash for both coffees. One final gesture of control, knowing she'd destroyed me one last time. Because she was right. Every doubt I'd had, every moment I'd wondered why someone like her would care about someone like me, she'd just confirmed. I'd been the perfect victim because I'd been so hungry for validation. That meeting was the turning point. The prosecutor used my testimony about that confession as evidence of consciousness of guilt and lack of remorse. Her own lawyer told her that confession had been one of the stupidest things she could have done. But I think Linda hadn't been able to help herself. She'd needed to make sure I knew I'd never been anything but a pawn. That final cruelty had been more important than protecting herself legally. The trial lasted 2 weeks and was brutal. Linda's defense tried to paint me as the mastermind, the scheming mistress who'd manipulated everyone, including their client. They showed photos of me at upscale restaurants with Linda, suggested I'd been blackmailing her. But the evidence was overwhelming. Text messages where Linda initiated everything, financial records showing she'd paid for everything, testimony from that first girlfriend describing identical patterns. The forensic accountant walked the jury through 3 years of embezzlement. The verdict came back in Rachel's favor on every count. Alienation of affection, fraud, embezzlement, all of it. Linda was ordered to pay back everything plus damages, would face criminal charges separately, and lost all access to Tyler's trust fund. Linda's face when the verdict was read showed no emotion. No remorse, no shock, just blank acceptance. She looked at me once, and there was something in her eyes that made my skin crawl. Not anger, but this calculating assessment, like she was still trying to figure out how to use me. My life after the trial was complicated. I wasn't the villain anymore, but I wasn't innocent either. I was the woman who'd been manipulated into an affair, which made me both sympathetic and still responsible. People at work treated me differently, some with pity, some with judgment. I lost my job 3 months after the trial. Not officially because of the scandal, but everyone knew. Rachel actually helped me find new work through a contact, which felt surreal but also like grace I didn't deserve. My relationship with my own family suffered. My parents were embarrassed by the publicity. My mom told me she didn't understand how I could have been so stupid, and I didn't have a good answer. Linda went to jail eventually, 18 months for the embezzlement. Not long enough, but her lawyer got her a deal. She'd be out in less than a year with good behavior, would probably rebuild somewhere else, would maybe find new people to manipulate. I saw Tyler one last time, about 6 months after the trial. He was trying to rebuild his life, going to therapy to process what Linda had done. He'd lost so much, not just his marriage, but his trust in his own judgment. He told me he was sorry for bringing me into Linda's world, sorry for not seeing what she was before it was too late. We talked about how Linda had systematically isolated him from anyone who might have helped him see the truth. I asked if he'd ever visit Linda in prison. He told me he'd written her a letter saying he wanted no contact for the rest of his life. She'd responded with justifications and victim blaming, proving she still didn't understand or didn't care. The woman I'd thought was my ally had been a predator from the moment she'd approached me at that gala. Every kind word had been manipulation. Every gesture of support had been control. People ask me if I regret the affair. The answer is complicated. I regret the pain I caused Rachel, who never deserved any of it. I regret not seeing Linda's manipulation sooner. But I don't regret learning what I learned about predators like her. It's been 2 years since that charity gala where Linda hand-picked me to destroy Tyler's marriage. 2 years since I became the other woman, the accomplice, the victim, the survivor, all those labels that don't quite capture what happened. I'm 28 now, living in a different neighborhood, working a different job, trying to build a life that isn't defined by those 9 months. Linda got out of prison 6 months ago, served her reduced sentence and walked free. I heard she moved to Florida, changed her social circles, probably already found new people to manipulate. She never apologized, never showed remorse. Her last communication to Tyler was a birthday card with a generic message and no return address, which he threw away. I think about her sometimes, more than I'd like. Not with longing, but with analytical distance, trying to understand what made her that way. Was she always a narcissist? Did losing her husband break something? Or was she just someone who learned manipulation worked? I'll never know. Rachel and I aren't friends exactly, but we have this understanding that comes from surviving the same predator. We get coffee occasionally, talk about rebuilding. She's started dating again, slowly, learning to trust after being betrayed so completely. Tyler moved away about a year ago, needed distance from everything that reminded him of Linda. He sent me a message before he left, thanked me for testifying, for being brave enough to admit I'd been manipulated instead of pretending I'd been in control. I don't know if I've forgiven myself yet. Forgiveness implies I understand what I did wrong and have made peace with it. But the truth is more complicated. I was manipulated, yes, but I also made choices. I gave my number to a married man. I showed up at Linda's apartment. I ignored warning signs. Being a victim of manipulation doesn't erase being an active participant in an affair. Both things are true, and I'm still learning how to hold both truths at the same time. Therapy has helped. It took months to find a therapist who understood narcissistic abuse and didn't just see me as the other woman who deserved what happened. My therapist tells me people like Linda target individuals with specific vulnerabilities, that my need for acceptance made me ideal for someone who specialized in offering conditional love. I've learned things about myself I didn't want to know, that I was so desperate to belong somewhere that I'd ignore my own moral compass, that I equated being chosen with being valued, even when the person choosing me had ulterior motives. The other woman label still follows me sometimes, whispered in professional circles or brought up by people who only know the headlines. I've stopped trying to defend myself or explain. The people who matter know the whole story. Linda is out there somewhere, probably rebuilding her image, probably working on her next victim. Narcissists like her don't change, don't learn, don't stop hunting. I hope whoever she targets next sees the signs I missed. I'm curious about something. Do you think someone can be both a victim and a villain in the same story? Because that's what I am, what I'll always be. I was manipulated by Linda, used as a weapon against people I should never have hurt. But I also made choices, ignored red flags, participated in destroying a marriage. Subscribe if you've made it this far, because your perspective on this might help me figure out where I go from here. The woman Linda tried to diminish, the other woman who became her tool and then her target, is still standing. Changed, damaged, but aware now of how manipulation works and determined never to be someone's weapon. Again? And the question I'll let you wrestle with is whether learning those lessons was worth the cost of becoming the other woman in the first place. Maybe that was always the real lesson, that some experiences transform you even as they destroy parts of who you used to be.